Now is the time for the parties to finalize its terms, bring the hostages home, and secure security for Israel and Gaza free of Hamas' grip, ease the suffering in Gaza, and end this war. On October 7th, since October 7th, we've also been determined to prevent a wider war that engulfs the entire region. Hezbollah, unprovoked, joined the October 7th attack, launching rockets into Israel. Almost a year later, too many on each side of the Israeli-Lebanon border remain displaced. A full-scale war is not in anyone's interest. Even if the situation has escalated, a diplomatic solution is still possible. In fact, it remains the only path to lasting security to allow the residents from both countries to return to their homes and the border safely. And that's what we're working tirelessly to achieve. As we look ahead, we must also address the rise of violence against innocent Palestinians on the West Bank and set the conditions for a better future, including a two-state solution where the world, where Israel enjoys security and peace and full recognition and normalized relations with all its neighbors, where Palestinians live in security, dignity, and self-determination in a state of their own.
The war that Israel is waging in Gaza has gone on too long. The tens of thousands of civilian victims in Palestine cannot be justified. There is no explanation possible for this. There are too many innocent people who have died, and we mourn them too. And those people who have died are an outrage for humanity and a dangerous source of hatred, resentment, which threatens and will threaten everyone's security, including that of Israel tomorrow. So this war needs to stop, and a ceasefire needs to happen as soon as possible, at the same time as the hostages are released. And humanitarian assistance needs to arrive en masse in Gaza. This is a position that we have held since October 2023. Where the resolutions with many of us. Let's hold the first humanitarian. We held a humanitarian conference for Gaza in November 2023 in Gaza. It's now a question of political will, given the destruction of the military capacity of Hamas, and it is imperative that a new page is turned in Gaza for the guns to be silent, for humanitarian workers to return, and for civilians to finally be protected. France will participate in any initiatives that will save lives and would allow for everyone's safety to be protected. The deployment of an international mission must open the way for the implementation of the two-state solution. It is up to the Security Council to take a position on this. And also, without further ado, the necessary provisions need to be taken to preserve the link between Gaza and the West Bank, to restore Palestinian Authority and its functions, and also to ensure the reconstruction of the territory, and to once again make life possible.
The collective punishment of an entire population, including the indiscriminate slaughter of civilians, most of whom are women and children, has long gone beyond the realm of self-defense. As the world watches on helplessly, Israel continues to flout its international obligations, including the orders of the ICJ and successive Security Council resolutions. Instead, the right of self-defense is being used as a weapon of mass extermination, stoking legitimate fears of genocide. No state, large or small, should feel comfortable and safe when such atrocities are allowed to continue with impunity. The war in Gaza must end now. We reiterate our demand for an immediate ceasefire and the release of all hostages and Palestinians illegally detained. Madam President, for more than 75 years, the Palestinian people have been denied the right of self-determination. We must advance the two-state solution, as this remains the only viable option for a future where Palestinians and Israelis live in peace and security.
Mr. President, in the state of Palestine, while striving to play a positive role in response to global challenges, we are regrettably further burdened by Israel's illegal occupation and aggressions in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. For over 76 years, our people have been forced to endure multiple man-made catastrophes that have directly undermined our efforts to achieve justice, peace, and prosperity. As I speak to you, before you, our people in Gaza are enduring one of the darkest chapters in modern history. For nearly a year now, Israel's genocidal war has caused unprecedented loss and suffering and humanitarian catastrophe. At the same time, our people in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, continue to face systemic threats driven by the escalating settlers' violence, military raids, movement restrictions, and financial siege, withholding of Palestinian tax revenues.
The world is watching, and history will judge us by the courage we show. And it is not just the future that will hold us accountable, so will the people of the here and now. They will judge whether we as the United Nations will surrender to inaction or will fight to uphold the principles that anchor this institution and our world. Right now they are asking whether we will stand by as parents watch their children waste away, as doctors watch their patients die for lack of basic medical supplies, and as more innocent lives are lost because the world failed to act. This war must end. Hostages and detainees must return home. But every day we wait is one day too long for far too many.
The world has witnessed the true nature of the Israeli regime. It has witnessed how the regime carries out atrocities in Gaza, and in 11 months has murdered in cold blood over 41,000 innocent people, mostly women and children. Its leaders label this genocide, the killing of children, war crimes and state terrorism as legitimate self-defense. They label hospitals, kindergartens and schools as legitimate military targets. They label the freedom-loving and brave people around the world who protest against their genocide as anti-Semitic. They label and oppress people who have stood up against 7 decades of occupation and humiliation as terrorists.
A year ago, I called for a conference for peace on Palestine at this very rostrum, but the first bomb yet had not been dropped. Now 20,000 boys and girls have been killed under the bombs, and the presidents of the countries of human destruction are laughing in these very corridors with the help of mass media that today are the owners of major capital. They are reordering a world, and they're creating a world without democracy and without freedom. The democratic project of humankind is dying along with life, while at the same time racists, supremacists, those who stupidly believe that the Aryan race is the superior race are getting ready to dominate the world, brandishing the threat of bombs and terror over human beings. The control of humankind on the very foundations of barbarism is being built. And that is being played out in Gaza, Lebanon. When Gaza dies, humanity will die, the whole of humanity. The people of God was not the people of Israel, it would seem. It is not the people of the USA. Rather, the people of God is humankind as one. The children of Gaza, they were humankind, the chosen people of God.
This is a message of the 6 points of understanding that China and Brazil offer for a process of dialogue to be established and for the hostilities to end. In Gaza and the West Bank, we are witnessing one of the greatest humanitarian crises in recent history, which is now spreading dangerously to Lebanon. What began as a terrorist action by fanatics against innocent Israeli civilians has become a collective punishment for the entire Palestinian people. There have been over 40,000 fatal victims, mostly women and children. The right to defense has become the right to vengeance, which prevents an agreement for the release of hostages and postpones the ceasefire.
The violence the Palestinian people are being subjected to is a grim continuation of more than half a century of apartheid that has been perpetrated against Palestinians by Israel. We South Africans know what apartheid looks like. We lived through apartheid. We suffered and died under apartheid. We will not remain silent and watch as apartheid is perpetrated against others.
The war, the massacre that has been going on in Gaza for the last 350 days. And since October 7, 41,000 Palestinians have been killed in the continuous Israeli attacks. 41,000 lives, 41,000 people, mostly children and women, were ruthlessly taken away. And no one knows where more than 10,000 people are, most of which are children. And likewise, 100,000 people were injured, maimed, or they lost their limbs. 172 journalists were killed while trying to do their job under very difficult circumstances. And more than 500 medics have been killed while they were trying to save lives. Humanitarian aid workers and the United Nations personnel who came to the rescue of the people of Gaza who were struggling with hunger and thirst were killed. More than 215 United Nations personnel. They hit marketplaces, tents, and camps where the refugees were sheltered. They hit 820 mosques and 3 churches that shouldn't have been touched even in war. And they deliberately hit dozens of hospitals, hundreds of schools, more than 130 ambulances carrying patients. They shredded the Charter of the United Nations from the rostrum of the United Nations and shamelessly challenged the whole world, who are people of conscience. From this very rostrum, they challenged them. My friends, leaked images from Israel's prisons, which it has turned into concentration camps, clearly show what kind of barbarianism we are facing. As a result of Israeli attacks, Gaza has become the world's largest cemetery for women and children. More than 17,000 children were targeted by Israeli bullets and bombs. Hind Recep was only 6 years old. He and his family were seeking safety when their car was hit by Israeli forces. He lost everything. He lost his mother, father, siblings, cousins. He lost all the hopes he had packed. And only he survived. He waited desperately for rescue for 12 days. Will you come to take me? I'm fearful. Was waiting for a helping hand to reach out to him for 12 days. Despite the level of our world has reached, despite the technology at our disposal, despite our organizations with huge budgets employing tens of thousands of personnel, as a human family of 8 billion inhabitants, we haven't yet managed to rescue a 6-year-old girl, which is actually like an injured sparrow trapped under the rubble that was shaking before our eyes. Hundreds of Gazan children died and are still dying because they cannot find a morsel of a dry bread, a sip of water, and a bowl of soup. In Gaza, not only children are dying, but also the United Nations system. The values that the West claims to defend are dying. The truth is dying. The hopes of humanity to live in a more just world are dying one by one. I am asking you bluntly here, openly, frankly. I call out to you, oh human rights organizations. Are those in Gaza and the West Bank not human beings? Do children in Palestine have no rights? Can't they play out on the streets in their homelands safely? And calling out to the international press organizations, aren't the journalists murdered by Israel on live TV your colleagues whose offices were actually raided as well? I call out to United Nations Security Council. What are you waiting for to prevent the genocide in Gaza, to put a stop to this cruelty, this barbarianism? What are you waiting for to stop Netanyahu and his network, who is endangering the lives of the Palestinian people, which is a part of a mass murder network? And what are you still waiting for to stop them, putting to danger their own people and the entire region for political gain? I would like to call out to the countries supporting Israel in an unconditional manner. How long are you going to be able to carry the shame of witnessing this massacre? Dear friends, while children are dying in Gaza, in Ramallah, in Lebanon, while babies are dying in incubators, unfortunately, the international community has given a very bad test and failed in a big way. What's happening in Palestine, look, is a sign of a great moral collapse. I believe that the peoples of the world, the leaders of countries and international organizations should reflect on this painful picture, upon this painful landscape. And I would like to state very clearly and loudly here, the Israeli government, disregarding basic human rights, trampling on international law at every opportunity, is practicing ethnic cleansing, a clear genocide against a nation, a people, and occupying their lands step by step. Palestinians, whose freedom, independence, and most basic rights have been usurped, are rightfully exercising their legitimate rights of resistance against this occupation and ethnic cleansing. The just resistance of the Palestinian people against the occupiers of their land is too noble. It's honorable and legitimate to be called illegitimate. It's heroic and it's noble.